Summary of the Lovely Bones by Alice Sebold. Susie Salmon is killed when she is 14 years old. On December 6, 1973, after school, Susie walks home through the farm that separates her junior high school from her neighborhood. George Harvey, her next-door neighbor, is waiting in the field. He tells her to come see what he has made. Harvey makes a hole in the ground and tells Susie that she can climb down. Once Mr. Harvey is below the ground, he tells Susie how beautiful she is and tells her to take her clothes off. She and Harvey start to fight with their bodies, but Harvey wins and throws Susie to the ground. He starts to kiss her, and Susie thinks back to her first real kiss, which was with a student named Ray Singh just last week. Harvey keeps raping Susie even though she begs him to stop. Harvey tells her that when the show is over, she should tell him she loves him. Susie does it, but the end comes anyway. When Susie gets to heaven, she realizes that everyone's heaven is different. The dead talk to each other in the places where their worlds meet. Susie soon makes friends with a girl named Holly who, like Susie, just died. Franny, the girl's admissions guide, helps them get used to life in heaven and tells them the rules. All they have to do to get what they want is want it and understand why. Susie really wants to go back to Earth, but since she can't, she decides to spend her time in heaven watching the people she left behind. She wants to see their whole lives from start to finish so she can learn the secrets of growth, love, and life. Back on Earth, Susie's parents, Jack and Abigail, her younger sister, Lindsay, and her 4-year-old brother, Buckley, are upset when Detective Len Feinerman tells them that the search for Susie has turned into a murder probe. Susie says that when souls leave Earth, they often go by someone who is still alive. When Susie left Earth, she went by a friend named Ruth Connors who lived alone. Ruth becomes obsessed with learning as much as she can about Susie as she tries to make sense of what has happened to her. As Ruth's interest in Susie grows, so does Susie's interest in her memories of the short time she spent on Earth. Susie finally breaks through and tells her father who she is one morning while he is smashing his collection of ships in bottles. This was a craft that he and Susie used to do together. Susie shows herself to him in the pieces of glass, and she and Jack both understand that the line between the living and the dead is not so clear or final after all. A family owns and runs a pit on the edge of Norristown. They charge people to dump their old appliances and furniture there. Mr. Harvey throws Susie's body parts out of a safe and into a pit. Mr. Harvey feels Susie's charm bracelet in his jacket pocket as he goes back to his car. On his way home, he stops at a place where an industrial park is being built and throws the bracelet into the bottom of a man-made pond. Harvey keeps one charm from the band as a kind of prize. It's a Pennsylvania keystone with Susie's name on it. After a few weeks, Mr. Harvey gets that old urge to make something. Jack walks by Harvey's house and sees that he is making something that looks like a tent in the yard. Jack stops by and offers to help Harvey. Harvey lies and says that he is building a wedding tent every year to remember his late wife. Harvey apologizes for Jack's loss, and the two men get to work as it starts to snow. When the building is done, Jack says that Harvey knows something about Susie's death. Harvey goes back into the tent and tells them that the neighbors just saw Jack helping him build something, so it looks like they are friends to them. Back at home, Jack calls Len and tells him that he thinks Harvey knows something about what happened to Susie. Len Feinerman goes to see George Harvey at his house the next day. Len calls Jack after the visit to tell him that he didn't find anything. Samuel Heckler, one of Lindsay's friends, stops by on Christmas Day to give her a gift. At the same time, the Salmon family is opening their gifts in a somber way. Susie is both happy and envious as she watches her sister get her first kiss. Ruth starts walking through the fields every morning after Susie has been gone for a few weeks. Ray Singh, who is also upset about Susie's death, starts going on these walks with Ruth. They become close because they both feel lonely and are obsessed with Susie. Jack goes to the Singh's house one afternoon because he wants to talk to Ray about Susie. Jack talks to Rowana, Ray's mother. He tells her what he thinks happened to Harvey, and Rowana tells Jack that if it were her child, she would wait until she was sure who did it, then find a quiet way to kill that person. On the morning of Susie's funeral, Lindsay worries about what to wear. In the end, she picks out a dress from Susie's closet. Grandma Lynn, who is visiting from out of town, helps her, and the whole family goes to the funeral together. Friends and neighbors have come together at the church to say goodbye to Susie. Len Feinerman is there and is standing by the door. He plans to keep an eye on the people who come and go from the service to see if they do anything strange. At the end of the funeral, Lindsay sees George Harvey standing just outside the church and looking inside. Lindsay passes out, and Harvey gets away in the chaos. After a few months, Lindsay, Ruth, and Samuel all go to a summer camp for smart kids. Ruth tries to talk to Lindsay about Susie, even though Lindsay wants to stop being known as the dead girl's sister and make her own friends. The last week of the symposium always ends with a battle for the whole camp. This year, the task is to come up with a plan for the perfect murder. Lindsay is upset by the news, so she and Samuel go down to the lake to get away from it all. The two of them have their first sex under a rowboat, and Susie is jealous as she watches Lindsay have a good and happy time. As Susie watches Lindsay and Samuel make out, she says that how to commit the perfect murder is a popular game in heaven, and that she always picks an icicle because the weapon melts away. Back in Norristown, Mr. Harvey has taken great care not to stand out. Jack is still sure that he killed Susie, and he has been calling the cops all summer to tell them about his ideas. Len goes to Jack's house one day to tell him to stop calling about Harvey. That night, Jack is up in his study. He looks out his window and sees a beam of light moving toward the fields. Jack thinks it's Harvey, so he goes downstairs and gets a baseball bat. He then heads out to the cornfield. There, he doesn't find Harvey but Susie's friend Clarissa. In a moment of madness, Jack jumps toward Clarissa because he thinks she is Susie. Brian Nelson, who is dating Clarissa, jumps out of the corn and hits Jack with his own bat. Jack is taken to the hospital and put under anesthesia. The next morning, Abigail gets to the hospital early. She calls the cops and asks if Len Feinerman is free to join her at the hospital. When Len gets there, they both go outside to smoke. As they talk about losing their loved ones, Abigail's daughter and Len's wife, respectively, the air between them gets tense, and Abigail kisses Len. Lindsay goes back to middle school in the fall of 1974. As the school year starts, she is known not only as the sister of the dead girl, but also as the daughter of the town's nut job, since word has started to spread about Jack's accident in the field. As the first anniversary of Susie's death comes, Lindsay asks her father, Jack, if he still thinks Mr. Harvey killed Susie. Jack tells her that he has no doubts about it. One afternoon, Lindsay goes to the house of George Harvey. She gets into his basement and starts looking around his house. Lindsay finds an art book in Harvey's room. She opens it up and finds a plan for an underground building that will be built in the fields behind the junior high school. When Mr. Harvey gets home, he hears noise upstairs and goes to his room. He walks in just as Lindsay jumps out of the second-story window, and he watches her run back to her own house. Now that Jack has the picture that Lindsay stole, he calls the cops and asks for Len Feinerman. However, Len is not available. Susie says that Len is with her mother and that they are having sex while George Harvey, who has once again gotten the cops off his trail, packs up his things and leaves town. Ruth and Ray take some candles out to the fields on the date of Susie's death to remember her. When they get there, they are surprised to see that some of the Salmon's neighbors have already started to gather. When Lindsay is in her living room at home, she looks out the window and sees the group in the fields. She wants to go, but Abigail won't let her. Instead, she says that she wants to move on. Lindsay asks Abigail if she's going to leave their family, and Abigail says she won't. Abigail goes in the summer of 1975, drives to California, and gets a job at a farm. In the fall, Grandma Lynn stays with us. Since Mr. Harvey packed up his things and left in December 1975, he hasn't been seen or heard from. Lindsay goes to the police station to ask Feinerman why no one has been able to find Harvey. When she gets there, she sees one of her mother's scarves on his desk and learns that he was having an affair with her mother. In the fall of 1976, Len Feinerman goes to the evidence room to add a new piece of evidence to Susie's file, a Coke bottle with Susie's and Harvey's fingerprints that was recently found in the middle of a cornfield. Feinerman is upset that Jack was right the whole time. In Connecticut, a hunter finds the bones of a child's foot and Susie's Pennsylvania Keystone charm. Ray goes to the University of Pennsylvania to study medicine. Ruth moves to New York City, where she spends her days walking the streets and developing her second sight for places where girls and women have been killed in the past. Mr. Harvey is living wild along the Northeast Corridor. Once in a while, he drives through his old home in Norristown when it's dark. Len keeps track of the proof as more bodies connected to Harvey are found all over the Northeast. Lindsay and Samuel just got their college degrees. As they ride Samuel's motorcycle home from the wedding, it starts to rain, so they stop at an old, run-down Victorian house to get out of the rain. Samuel is amazed by the features and says that he wants to move into the house and fix it up. He wants Lindsay to help him do this, so he asks her to marry him. She says yes. Ruth's father calls her in New York City to tell her that the pit at the edge of Norristown is going to be filled in. Ruth is going to make a pilgrimage home to see the hole one last time before it closes. Jack has a heart attack when he gets back to Norristown. Susie wants Jack to die so that he can go to heaven with her, but Buckley begs Susie to let Jack live. Abigail hears about an accident at the farm. She calls the Norristown hospital and finds out that Jack has had a heart attack. She gets on a plane to go home. Abigail and Jack see each other again at the hospital, which makes Susie happy. Ruth and Ray, who are both back home in Norristown, go out to the pit to say goodbye to it. Susie watches them. Len shows up at the hospital at the same time and gives Jack the Keystone charm. Mr. Harvey has come back home. As he drives through his old neighborhood, he starts to think about all the women he has killed, and Susie watches as the ghosts of those women fill his car. Ruth and Ray go to the pit and stand at the edge of it for a while. Ruth sees Harvey's car going by. Her second sight lets her see all the ghosts hanging to the car, and she passes out in the middle of the road. Susie tips forward all of a sudden and falls to the ground. Ruth's body is taken over by Susie, while Ruth's soul tries to reach heaven. Susie is so happy to be back on Earth, and even happier to be in Ray's arms. Susie, feeling brave, suggests that they take a break at Hal's bike shop, which is just across the tracks from where they are. Susie uses an extra key to let the two of them into the apartment above the shop, and Ray starts to think that something has happened to Ruth. Susie takes off her clothes and takes a shower. She then invites Ray to join her. Ray joins Susie in the shower and makes love to her when he realizes that, even though it shouldn't be possible, Susie has fallen to Earth and is now living in Ruth's body. Susie then feels like she is being pulled back to heaven. Ruth goes back to her own body after being welcomed warmly in heaven for her hard work on behalf of women and children who were killed. When Jack Salmon gets out of the hospital, Lindsay, Abigail, and Buckley bring him home, and Susie watches. Ruana and Ray try to leave a freshly baked pie on the doorstep, but Abigail opens the door and invites them in. As their whole family sits in the living room, Samuel says that he wants to fix up the old Victorian house a few miles away. Ray says that Ruth's dad owns the house. Susie, who had been hovering in the living room, leaves and goes back to heaven. Lindsay and Samuel get married and start working on fixing up the house. Ray becomes a doctor, but he starts to think that the line between the world of the living and the world of the dead is not as clear as he thought. Ruth is still in New York City and is trying to write their story. One day, Susie sees Mr. Harvey, who is following a young woman, in a diner in New Hampshire. Harvey tries to talk to the woman outside the cafe, at the edge of a steep slope that goes down to a ravine. She turns him down, though. Harvey is knocked off his feet and into the ditch when an icicle falls from the roof of the diner and hits him. Back in Norristown, a guy shows his wife a charm bracelet he found on the ground earlier that day. His wife says that the little girl who lost it must be all grown up by now.
About the author. Alice Sebold was born in Wisconsin and grew up in Philadelphia's suburbs. She was assaulted while going off campus during her first year at Syracuse University, which is located in the state of New York. She then spent years working to assure that her rapist, whom she was not familiar with at the time, would finally be thrown in jail. The experience changed many of Sebold's writing interests and obsessions. Her 1999 biography Lucky, her 2002 debut book The Lovely Bones, and her 2007 follow-up The Almost Moon all have themes of violence, darkness, injustice, and the fact that evil is everywhere. Sebold has an MFA in fiction from the University of California, Irvine. She lives in San Francisco.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.